This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. What if your back pain wasn't caused by injury? And what if the solution didn't involve surgery, pills, or endless physical therapy? Today on Uncommonly Remarkable, I'm joined by Ben O'Loughlin. He's a musician, entrepreneur, and founder of the Back Republic, to explore why so many people suffer from chronic, unexplained pain and how the Alexander technique changed everything for him. If you've struggled with recurring tension, pain that doesn't show up on scans, or just want to understand how your body and nervous system work together, this episode is the one for you. Ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please welcome Ben to the show. Ben, welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to
we got a lot we can talk about, and I know that part of what we're going to talk about is thinking about back pain and pain management and understanding ways people can start thinking differently about what sometimes is pain that doesn't have a clear origin. Yeah. But there's just so much more to what you've done and how you've gotten here. And so I'm hoping we can get to touch on some of those things as we go along the way.
Yeah, man, I'm up for it.
So I guess we'll start with making sure we set the stage. You know, there are people out there who have some sort of back pain that is not necessarily generated via injury, right? And so, we all know people who've injured their backs in a variety of ways. They've been in accidents. They lifted things the wrong way. They've got some sort of degenerative disorder. They've got this chronic back pain. But there are a lot of people out there who wake up because they slept wrong, or they have recurring pain, or they have some chronic pain that doesn't necessarily come from acute injury. And that's a large portion of the people out there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, back pain is the single biggest cause of disability worldwide, actually, according to a World Health Organization report from, I think, 2019. And most of it is, as you say, you can't really pin it down to a particular cause. You go and get scans and it shows up nothing, or if it shows up nothing that you don't see in people without pain. And that's called non-specific back pain. And I think it's like 90% of cases of back pain where they have chronic back pain, chronic pain is when, some of your listeners, I'm sure, know this already, but when it recurs over time, it comes back, or it just stays constant. Acute pain. I was at the beach about 6 months ago with my family, and my kids were having trouble getting onto the waves. So I was, they had boogie boards, right? And so I was like grabbing the boogie board and like turning and wrenching them as hard as I could to get them on the wave. And we had a great time. But I was getting these little twinges from my back, and I kind of ignored it at the time. But then later in the day, I was like, "Oh, that really hurts." And that was back strain, right? And that is pretty common, back strain. That's a form of acute injury. It hurt me for a couple of days, and then it kind of went away. And a lot of back pain is like that. You lift it wrong or whatever, and that's acute pain, and that goes away. But chronic pain is where it just keeps coming back. And my own background was, when I was 20, 21, I had a lot of chronic pain, and I didn't know why. I hadn't injured myself. I hadn't done anything to my back, but I was getting constant back, neck, and shoulder pain, and even tension headaches, like most days of the week. So I would have these tension headaches. So I would have to take, just over-the-counter kind of painkillers for. And, I went to see a doctor. I saw a physical therapist, and they couldn't really tell me what it was about. And I'm sure many people are in that situation. It's an area which is sort of, I think we don't know enough about as a society, given how pervasive and how many people are affected. I think it's sort of underserviced.
And and I think you're right, and I think that most of us have these episodes where, man, it doesn't feel real good,
Mm.
and you think about, well, maybe I'm going to take something over the counter and NSAID. Maybe you ice it, maybe you do some heat therapy, but to your point, it's temporary, it goes away, and you don't think much about it.
Yeah.
But then sometimes those episodes start to come more frequently over time.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, those episodes become chronic, where they have moments of relief, but really most of the time they've got this pain that's going on.
Yeah, they do, absolutely, and that's it's a little bit the story of the frog in the saucepan. Like if you put a frog in the hot water, it'll jump out, but if you put it on the heat and slowly, heat it up, the frog will, I mean, no frogs were harmed in the making of this story, but but it's one of those things that kind of creeps up on you, and then you get little twinges, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're in constant pain, and it's in many cases, in my case at the time, I didn't really know what to do about it.
Well, and you raise a good point about that, because sometimes you lose perception of what's actually happening, right? Because you get used to having some level of discomfort, and that becomes your normal, and so you're tolerating some level of pain.
Yeah.
And it's really only after that pain escalates that you start to notice, man, this is not so great for me anymore.
Yeah, and in fact, in many cases, the actual injury that you may have had an injury, or you may have had a cause for the pain initially, some sort of damage or disease, and that goes away, but you still have the pain. It's really strange. People get in this loop of what's called central sensitization, where your pain system is reporting pain, but there's actually nothing. There's no damage that should be causing it, which is very distressing.
Well, let's talk about you then. So, you were suffering from this chronic pain, and you what did you try to alleviate it?
Oh yeah, I tried a lot of stuff, and I guess the first thing I went to a doctor, and they sort of just shrugged their shoulders. I went and saw a physical therapist, and I had, like, one of my shoulders was down about maybe an inch from the other shoulder. My right shoulder was, a little bit lower, and she just sort of said, "Well, try and hold your shoulders straight." And that wasn't such great advice. I have to say, in hindsight, it did nothing for me. I saw a chiropractor a few times, and that was helpful at the time. Like, I got some temporary pain relief. It's a good business model, though, chiropractic, because it doesn't really, have. It's the same with, like, massage and dry needling. A lot of these therapies, they're really good for symptom management. And if you have, if you go to them, you can get. But the evidence, scientific evidence, shows that they're not really treating the cause. They're not really treating the long-term condition. They're just offering temporary symptom management, temporary relief, and that's what I experienced. I had, I saw a chiropractor, a massage therapist. I got, dry needling. I got acupuncture. I did meditation. I did yoga.
Oh, wow.
Stretching. I went to the gym. Like, all of this stuff, and none of it, like, worked worth a damn.
Wow. And I'm assuming that during this time, did you also have imaging and see a physician and make sure there was nothing actually physically going on too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that would be my first piece of advice, would be to see a physician, because you never know what's lurking in the shadows. And in many cases, the physician, I think doctors in general are very frustrated that they don't have better solutions to offer. Doctors, it's a caring profession. They go into it because they want to help people. And they do. I mean, it's wonderful. Like, I love my doctor. She's amazing. But I think doctors in general are pretty frustrated that they don't have more that they can do for people with this kind of back pain. So yeah, I went to the doctor. I did all the usual things. Got the imaging, all of that. But it proved difficult to treat at the time. I sort of ended up finding something that worked a lot better. But at the time, I remember. I play double bass. I play jazz double bass, and
which
I
is
would
pretty
get.
awesome, by the way.
Yeah, I had a gig last night actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
And
it
so you're
was.
standing, right? Like you're standing and
Yeah,
having
yeah,
to reach, right?
yeah. Reaching like it's not like ergonomically. It's a bit of a disaster because you've got to have one hand up for hours at a time.
Oh, yeah.
So the shoulder can kind of get hunched up, and then that can tense your neck, and and the other arm is sort of down, sort of more like around your waist, playing plucking on the strings, and so there's this kind of asymmetry about it, when I was sort of self-taught, so I didn't have the benefit of a classical bass teacher who could help sort of set up my posture properly.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
I
yeah.
went back and studied when I lived in New Jersey. I went back and studied with a teacher for a couple of years, or maybe a year, and that straightened out a lot of things. But boy, I used to get myself in pretty bad shape playing gigs. Like I would have a horrible headache the next day because I was so tense, and I was really just so.
Well, now I got to ask, how did you get into double bass? Like, where did that come from?
Well, you see, my brother played when I was like a mid-teenager. Probably my brother had electric bass, and but he kind of gave up. And then the school band, like the jazz band, big
Yeah.
band, I found out they needed a bass player, and I'd played piano and clarinet and stuff early on, so I could read music, and so I just said, "Oh, I'm a bass player." And so I showed up to rehearsals, and I would just keep the volume down really low until I figured out how to play.
That's amazing. But then you apparently you stuck with it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I loved it. And then when I was at college, so my uncle, my dad's younger brother, he was for many years a symphony bass player in a city called Brisbane. He was like the principal bassist of the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, and he lent me one of his basses because he knew that I was I said to my dad I wanted to play to play upright bass, and my dad asked his younger brother who was a bass player what should I do, and my uncle said, here, borrow this.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was probably about 20 when maybe not 1920 when I got onto double bass, and I loved it. It was instantly, and I went on to I went and studied in New Jersey and did a jazz performance degree at a place called William Patterson University.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. And it's just neat to hear that history because you've done a lot of other things. You've started some companies and you've done some entrepreneurial things. And the music is kind of for me really interesting. I actually I played multiple instruments all through middle school, high school, and into college.
Oh
And
wow,
so
what instruments?
it I call it a clean sweep on the woodwind side,
Yeah.
minus flute and piccolo. But I started with alto sax, and I played tenor and baritone, and then I played clarinet and contrabass clarinet.
Oh wow.
I did a little bit of oboe work, which was which was very difficult. Double reeds are not the same. And
Any
then I
bassoon?
learned. I did not do any bassoon because I started doing French horn.
Oh wow. Brass
I
as well.
marched with the I marched with the euphonium. I did a little baritone work for small band stuff, and so I got to play a whole bunch of things. And so
Wow.
when I talk to somebody who's played instruments, it's always kind of cool for me.
Yeah, yeah. I just got a U bass. Have you ever heard of those?
No, no.
Oh gosh, I'll show you. Hang on a sec.
Okay.
This here is a ukulele bass.
Oh, wow.
I just got it yesterday. It's like this tiny little thing,
Oh, how neat is that?
and
That's pretty cool. And I've never seen one of those, but for people who are listening, it's really interesting because you think of a ukulele, it's kind of tiny, and this thing looks like a cross between a guitar and a violin.
Yeah,
And so it's a little bigger than you think it would be, but not huge, and it sounds pretty cool.
it's tiny. It sounds like a double bass.
Oh, look at that.
Hi, that's right.
And you can play a lot.
Tink, da, okay.
Man, that's pretty awesome. So what you can't see in this room, and I can't quite move the camera that far, is I actually have a cello in the corner.
Oh wow, you play cello too.
No, I don't play cello, but I want to learn. And
Oh
so
wow.
my first step was I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn to play cello. I don't know when I'm going to learn to play cello, but I'm going to get one. So
Yeah.
I found this cello, and it's beautiful, and it's standing in the corner. It makes something great to look at, and I go over and pluck on it sometimes. But I'm really going to learn to play cello. It's just one of those things. I've never played string instruments, and so I figured the strings are farther apart. It's manageable, and so
Yeah.
I should be able to. If I'm going to learn to play a string instrument, this would be a good start. So,
Oh yeah, I love cello. I had a cello actually. I played it a little bit. I was very inspired by the Bach cello suites, which are
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
amazing.
familiar. Yeah,
Six kind of suites of music. Each one's got like five movements or so. And oh man, it's really beautiful. And I started playing cello, but it was like way out of my league, like to play that music.
right,
And,
right.
and I ended up just giving my cello to a friend of mine who had always wanted to play cello, and so I just gave it to her because I was playing more bass anyway.
Fair enough. Man, so when we were talking about the positioning for bass, I can just imagine how that if you're having any sort of back pain, how at the end of doing that you would have even more.
Yeah.
And so, you talked a little bit about doctors and how they really want to help people. I think you're exactly right, but the toolbox is kind of limited, right? Because you either have a surgical solution, or maybe you have a pharmaceutical solution. But when you can't really identify what the causative nature is, it makes it really hard to assign one or the other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it just kind of leaves you with not a lot of options when it comes to treatment.
Yeah, and that's incredibly frustrating for the doctor as well, because I think it's an area that is not sort of well enough understood. There's a lot going on in the actual pain management area. So, like with this central sensitization, like people get in a kind of a loop with pain, and then there's also the sort of psychological interventions, techniques that sort of help you just accept what's going on and reduce the anxiety around it. There's acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnosis. There's a lot of those sorts of techniques which are great, and there's a lot of research, evidence to support that. But there's a little bit more to it than that. I feel in a lot of cases, because there is, even though you can't necessarily see it on an MRI or on an X-ray, there's a lot of disorders of soft tissue. I think in one study, like 85% of people presenting with back pain also had something called myofascial pain syndrome. And that's myofascial means basically muscles and fascia. Fascia, for those who don't know it, like if you're making like a chicken dish, when you cut up the chicken, there's this sort of like this kind of translucent kind of whitish kind of film, and that's all through your body, and that can get distressed as well. So, and it's a very important organ, the fascia. But
Yeah. And that's chicken is a great example, right? Because it's beneath the skin, above the muscle tissue, kind of this in between layer.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. It's a connective thing for all over the body.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so you were looking for solutions, but how did you end up learning what actually worked?
Yeah. Well, I guess it just so happened that through a friend of a friend, I got in touch with a guy who taught something called the Alexander technique, which I'd never heard of, and which most people have never heard of. But it's a technique of just changing the way your mind and your body creates or manages muscle tension. And in my case, and as the research evidence with myofascial pain indicates, a lot of back pain is either caused by too much tension or is made worse by too much tension. And we get into these patterns of being tense, being tight. Maybe it's because we're sitting at a computer and or there's chronic stress, and stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight nervous system, which is designed to help us deal with, saber-toothed tigers or whatever. But if we, and it creates this tension. It gets the blood going in the muscles. It gets us ready to fight or to run, fight or flight. But it's not such a good, the way the modern lifestyle is that there's this kind of chronic stress and there's this chronic interruptions. There's so much to grab our attention, and it means that we often, that fight or flight is kind of continuously engaged, like we're always somewhat in fight or flight, and then we get into what's called the startle pattern, which is basically where your shoulders are tense and lifted, your head's kind of tipped back a little bit. There's tension in your neck and your back, and it's all. And that was the case with me. I had this kind of constant startle pattern. I had constant tension. My back was curved to the right. I had scoliosis, which is one thing the doctor did tell me. And what I came to realize through this Alexander technique was that all of the tension starts in the brain. Like muscles, generally speaking, don't tense themselves. They respond to signals from the brain, from primary motor cortex for the voluntary stuff, and I won't go into the neuroscience, but there are different structures in the brain that create tension in our body. And when that is out of control, when that is dysregulated, we have chronic tension in our muscles. And when we have chronic tension, it's a little bit like, you're scuba diving and the air hose is getting squeezed. That's what it's like. Your muscles experience that because the blood vessels that supply, oxygen and, blood sugar, glucose, all that stuff to our muscles, it gets squeezed by the muscle tension. And then your muscles don't get oxygen, then they don't get glucose, and they don't get all these other nutrients. And they freak out and they start producing pain symptoms, the signals that go into your central nervous system. And, so the chronic tension squeezes your muscles. They get tense, then they get pain, and that can sort of continue, and it becomes a habit. It becomes something that your brain just does automatically, and your muscles just do automatically. And that turns into this thing called myofascial pain syndrome, and that's the root of a lot of back pain, and it doesn't show up on an X-ray, and people don't know about it. They know they feel tense, they might feel discomfort. They've got maybe knots of tension in their back or their shoulders. But what people don't realize, and why I think treating it when you treat the muscles, you massage the muscles, or you poke needles in them, or you crack your back, or you're addressing fundamentally the distress that your muscles are in. But if you're not distressing the signals from your brain that's causing that tension, then it's going to come back.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing about addressing root cause, right? And I mean, I think it's interesting to think about the tension that you may carry that is not appropriate tension, because you got to have some tension, right? Like there's got to be some contraction in order for you to function. Like we couldn't sit here and talk to each other unless we were doing some contraction to hold us upright, et cetera, et cetera.
Keep your eyes open.
That's right. Some contraction somewhere. But the thing is, over time, when you're responding to or have that stress response, it becomes baseline, right? And so in lieu of the normal contractions that you need for function, you escalate your baseline to include these modifications in posture and tension. And then it becomes kind of, we all talk about and have heard about muscle memory, and how you adapt to doing certain things a certain way. And the brain just kind of does that, and that becomes your new normal, right?
Yeah. it does. I use the highly technical terms good tension and bad tension. And good tension is tension that helps you get done what you want to get done. It's functional. Bad tension is anything else,
Right. That
that you
makes
don't
sense.
need.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and you're right, it does become habitual, and your brain kind of tunes out the knowledge that you're tensing. Like if you go lift a barbell or you go lift a cup of coffee or something, you kind of are aware and you can feel the muscle tension. But what can happen is over
Yeah.
time, if you're chronically tense, your brain just kind of tunes it out, because it's like if you're, like you're working in the office and you can hear traffic noise, that's just constant, and your brain can just tune out that noise. And the same with the muscle tension and the muscle activation, and this your brain just kind of forgets that you're doing it, and it becomes the kind of the new normal. It becomes the new baseline, and that's where people get into trouble, because that chronic tension, you may not know you're doing it, but it is having an effect, and it is reducing the blood flow. It's compressing. So I sometimes like to think about like a radio mast, which has got these kind of guy ropes.
Yep.
It's like long and tall, but it's got these cables. And if you tighten all the cables at the same time, it doesn't move, but it compresses. It tries to drive the radio mast down into the ground.
Down. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what can happen with your neck and your all of your spine, really. Is if there's all these muscles around your neck and around your back, your torso, that used to move you, to stabilize you and move you. And if they're all chronically tense, what they're doing is they're compressing the spine like a spring. And typically the spine over time doesn't like that very much. You get these compressed discs and bulging discs, degenerative disc disease, all this sort of stuff, hernias, like all that, and it gets to that stage where maybe you do need surgery, and it's a real problem. But the root cause of a lot of it is too much, my highly technical term, too much bad tension.
And so in what you've learned and through the Alexander technique, you're learning to unlock some of that tension by teaching the brain to think or handle it differently.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. You're kind of retraining your brain to use more good tension and less bad tension. So the body has this natural mechanism called the automatic postural control, and you see it. I feel like you see it most clearly in young kids who are just learning to walk. They're walking around and they're just beautifully coordinated. They may fall on their butt, but they're coordinating their neck and their back really well and effortlessly. And they're often, you see it in animals, that they're really poised. My favorite animal is the meerkat. You can see them just standing up beautifully straight, and there's this inbuilt system called the automatic postural control. And what happens is that gets lazy, and we end up using sort of the voluntary motor system, and it's a different part of the brain, a different part of the central nervous system. And what we need to do is calm down, and the voluntary motor system is the one that responds to the fight or flight mechanism. So we need to calm that down and reduce that, and at the same time kind of rebuild the rebuild the automatic postural control. So the automatic postural control knows how to do good posture, it knows how to do good tension, it knows how to support us without pain, without distress, without twisting or turning of the spine, and that's always there with us. But it's just in some ways it gets lazy, it gets and we need to just waken it up. And when we do waken it up, we don't need all of that tension anymore. Like a lot of the time, that tension is really like, it's like duct tape or gaffer tape, which is like to try and keep us together. When the automatic postural control isn't working, then the voluntary muscles get to work, and they're like the short twitch muscles, and they're really not supposed to be doing posture.
Yeah, right. They're not really designed for that type of work.
Yeah, they're often different muscles. So, the multifidus, for example, is a lot of little muscles in the spine that are postural muscles. But if they get lazy, then another group called the spinal erectors, which are more controlled by the voluntary motor system, they kind of kick in. And so you actually end up using all the wrong muscles to do the job. So not only do you have bad tension, but you have, you're using the wrong physiology to keep you upright. So, and that's where the problem. So you just sort of need to rehabilitate your automatic postural mechanism.
Well, that's actually a really interesting way to think about it, and maybe something that I've not actively thought about it as I've started to really kind of think about sitting here, because there really should be an automatic mechanism for being able to do normal things, and to your point, when that system is being overridden by the more voluntary muscles, you can get the job done, but it's being done in a totally different way, an altered movement, which becomes a fatiguing thing, right? And so, if you think about your heart designed to pump, that's what it's doing. It's just pumping. It is not necessarily fatiguing for the heart. But if you mimic that with your hand and you're pumping, at some point your hand gets tired, because that's not really what the hand is doing. And so it's a really interesting thing to think about. How much does the external environment play a role in how we think about the voluntary piece? And so, from everything from the way we sit at our desks to the mattresses and pillows we choose, to the way we sit in the car when we drive, are those things contributing to the overall issue?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So there's, I guess the two terms that I would use would be ergonomics. That's, how well set up is your workstation, what height is your screen, and, how's your chair, is it kind of tilted back, or is it kind of promoting a slumpy sort of posture, like a lot of car seats kind of promote, they kind of just lead you into this kind of real slump. And then there's the sort of the second word I would use is occupational. So, what are you doing in your job? Like, for optometrists, maybe you're looking, into into a scanning machine, or, or there's just some things that you do that you have to do that, or maybe you're seeing someone and you're kind of constantly twisting between the computer screen and looking at them, or if you're, a warehouse worker, are you lifting with your back or with your knees? Or is your back sort of more or less straight, or is it kind of bent over, and are you concentrating the stress in your spine? So, there's definitely a lot to that. However, you have to ask how come some people might sleep on the same mattress, or work at the same workstation, or lift the same box, and they're fine.
Yeah.
So, it's a combination. Those things are definitely not helping you, but at the same time, you should be able to live your life and do all of those things. It's not like you're, jumping off a building and smashing yourself. Like, it should be possible to do it safely.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I mean, particularly, and so it does point back to having an appropriate baseline, right? And having everything set to neutral, so to speak, to start before you are doing those types of things.
Yes, and that goes to the sort of the ergonomics of how, if you're sitting with your spine more or less straight, then the weight is going down through the vertebrae, and you're sort of supporting yourself. And it's a bit like if a flagpole is leaning off to one side, the cables on the other side are going to be pretty tight. Because the fundamental setup, the ergonomics are such that, and if you've got like forward head posture, for example, the strain on your neck muscles is like there's 4 times as much effort required to hold your head up than if you're sitting more or less neutral. So the baseline, having a fairly neutral posture and a fairly low level of voluntary motor effort, that puts you in a good position to then do whatever it is you need to do, like lift the box or reach up to the shelves or, or type at the screen, and that the voluntary components of that, like moving your arms, like using these external, like peripheral muscles, fast twitch muscles, that is all then supported by a posture that's kind of working, and that's the posture is your central stabilizing kind of mechanism, and then everything that you do around that becomes easier. But if you're having to kind of duct tape yourself together with these wrong muscles, then you get into pain and discomfort, and you do things with your body that it's not really meant to do.
And so you found this technique, and you started using the principles for yourself. How long did it take you to start to notice differences in the way you felt?
Well, it was really instant. In my first lesson, I felt the pain reduce, and I've got this real sort of stretching feeling, like all the muscles in my neck and shoulders were just kind of stretching out, which was like a relief, but it was also, a very strange feeling. And it took a while for that to actually get to the point where I had no pain whatsoever. I mean, I teach this stuff now, and one of my students I make these videos online. He watched like 3 or 4 videos and came to a group coaching session, and his 30-year scoliosis pain just went away.
Wow.
Like half an hour into the session. So some people it's really fast. Other people, I mean, for myself, like I had a lot of anxiety and depression and all this other stuff going on that, and the chronic, central sensitization, which is when your pain system is on overdrive. So I had a more complex case. But if it's just muscle tension, then, that can respond pretty quickly, actually.
That's pretty amazing, and it's very different than the experience people have if they have been going to have massages, or they've been in dry needling, or because you're having the symptoms addressed, and you get this time period where things were okay, and then it kind of tapers off, and you got to go back and get another fix, which is, to your point, it's great for the provider, because you get to see a patient back and they come back to see you. In your case, you're working yourself out of business. You've got to go find new people, because you've got your people are getting fixed, which is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, as a 25-year entrepreneur, like, it's a horrible business model. That gentleman who had the scoliosis pain for 30 years, he had pain every day for 30 years. And I was like, oh, so you want to enroll in part 2 of the course? And he was like, no. I don't have any pain anymore.
Well, the thing is, though, Ben, if this is, and maybe we're answering our own question, because if you can successfully mitigate a lot of back pain for people who don't have physical injury, or some other organic cause that requires surgery, then it feels like it should be something that people know about and they practice and they use all the time. But quite honestly, until starting to talk to you, I'd never heard of the Alexander technique. So why is that?
Yeah, well, Frederick Matthias Alexander, who kind of figured it out, he was an actor, and this is back in the late 1800s, and he kept losing his voice. Like, he was fine speaking like normally conversationally, and this is the days before microphones, but then he would go on stage and then he would have to project and fill a room with his voice, doing like a Shakespeare soliloquy, or some sort of poetry or whatever. He would recite, and he would lose his voice, and the doctors couldn't tell him why, and he ended up figuring it out using mirrors to actually watch, and he figured out he was actually pulling his larynx down and pulling his head back, and all this pattern of tension through his whole body, the bad tension, where he would rest, he would stop, and then he'd get his voice back, and it was fine in speaking, but he would go to recite, and for some reason that stimulus of reciting, where he tried to project his voice, caused him to do all of this stuff to himself with the tension. And since then, to your question, I think it's been really popular in performing arts. People who use their body for their work, like singers, or musicians in general, actors, people in the arts. It's been very popular. So you get quotes by, Roald Dahl, for example, who's the goat of children's. I mean, if you've ever heard of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I mean, he wrote that book and
Yeah.
a bunch of others. And then Hugh Jackman, the Wolverine, he's on record saying, he thinks Alexander technique is like this sort of secret base that you go to operate,
That's
So it's
fantastic.
performing artists. I mean, not just performing artists, but some researchers as well. Like there's a couple of Nobel Prize winning physiologists who, one of them in particular spent half of his Nobel Prize winning acceptance speech talking about it. But it's something that is just hasn't really made a big impact on the mainstream, and I think it's because it's been so focused on the performing arts. But my mission is really to make it available to everyone who's not a performing artist who just has maybe never heard of it, and make it available as a toolkit for people to just manage their own back pain. But it's kind of weird because it's working with the central nervous system. I've had students who've reported that their tinnitus has gone away, like they're ringing in their ears. I've got a woman who, she by the end of the course, she was like walking 10 kilometers without, which is about 6 miles without pain. But she also said her PTSD symptoms got a lot better.
Wow.
So yeah, it's kind of useful in a lot of situations where your nervous system is responding automatically to something, to a stimulus. Like she heard a helicopter, and she'd worked in Somalia in a very war-torn kind of area as a kind of volunteer engineer, and she had this PTSD where a helicopter would really send her into panic mode. But she managed to just change the way her nervous system responded through this work. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, which actually it can make a little bit of sense, right? Because there's a physical response and a psychological response involved in PTSD for most people, and so being able to better control, reset to baseline, the physical response may have an effect then on the psychological response as well.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that you're sharing this with people. How are you doing that? You have courses that you teach, but people can do those courses online. Is that right?
Yeah. People do the courses online, and then there's a kind of a group coaching component where people come like once a week. The courses themselves are like, you end up watching about 10 or 15 minutes worth of videos a week, maybe 20 minutes. And so it's not, and they're kind of fun. They're kind of lighthearted. They're really just, edutainment, I guess you might say. I deliberately try not to bash people with the medical stick too much, and just give people the tools. But then it's quite subtle work. So the group sessions are really important for people to actually learn how to use the techniques in a way that actually works properly. It took this guy Alexander like 10 years to figure it out. And it doesn't take that long when you've got someone who knows what they're doing, but it really helps it's a little bit like you could learn piano just from a book or from a video. But if you've got a teacher who's saying, okay, no, this is the wrong fingering here, or you want to curve your fingers in this way, it really helps you to kind of, get good technique or to do the exercises, ergonomically.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it's the difference between general information that applies kind of across the board versus individual information that is very specific to you and where you are and what you need to do. And so that makes all the sense. If people wanted to learn more, where would they go?
I have a website, backrepublic.com. Back Republic is sort of like a place where people come to, like a town square where they can learn and they can apply these techniques, and it's available to everyone, because there's only I think 3,500 Alexander Technique teachers in the world, which I calculated it's something like one teacher per 2.5 million people. So, so no wonder you haven't heard of it.
Yeah, there's
Um,
not. That's incredible. But yeah, that's part of the reason.
yeah. So yeah, I have an online course which you can, people can come and watch videos and learn about it. And then I'm creating a webinar soon, which is another way that people can kind of learn about this stuff. So it's going to be about an hour and goes into it in a lot more detail and gives people some practical techniques to get them started. And in fact, on the webinar, I'll be giving the same techniques that this gentleman with the scoliosis used to completely get rid of his pain. So my hope is that some people will be able to come to the webinar and get rid of their pain, and they'll never need to think of me again.
That's amazing. Come to a webinar, leave pain free.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, I really thank you for spending time with me today. I mean, this has been pretty awesome. I'm glad you got a new instrument though, and I was able to hear that because that sounds really, really cool. And you've inspired me to once again look into lessons for this cello.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think back pain is a serious thing, and people have had lots and lots of trouble. And there's been things like the pharmaceutical industry and solutions there, prescriptions that people have been prescribed that have all these other side effects and may ultimately not be ridding them of their pain. And so if there are people who are watching or listening who are having pain and looking for something that may actually give them some relief, I hope that they are able to visit the Back Republic so that they can learn some of these things that we talked about today.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, and it's really nice to talk to someone with a bit of with some some training clinician who sort of is in this world. It's always nice to have someone who asks questions and makes comments that is like already very informed. So I appreciate that.
Well, it was my pleasure, and hopefully someone out there has gotten something from this conversation. I'm gonna check out the Back Republic, and maybe we'll get to talk about some other things later on.
Yeah.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show, because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff, so go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.